Cold wind cuts across the San Francisco Bay at 2 in the morning. The water is 48 degrees. The current moves at nearly 8 miles per hour, dragging everything in its path toward the open Pacific. The searchlights sweep the concrete walls of the most infamous prison ever built on American soil. Every guard on duty believes what they have always believed. No one gets off this rock. No one beats the bay. No one disappears from Alcatraz. But on the night of June 11th, 1962, 3 men proved every single one of them wrong. And to this day, more than 60 years later, no one knows if they lived or if they died. No bodies were ever recovered. No confirmed sighting was ever made. The FBI investigated the case for 17 years and closed the file without a conclusion. The United States Marshals Service has never closed it. They are still looking. The case is still active. And the question still haunts everyone who has ever stared out across that freezing bay. Did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers actually make it? Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary opened in 1934. The United States government had a problem. The era of Prohibition had created a generation of criminals who were famous, who were celebrated in newspapers, who escaped from state prisons like they were walking out of hotels. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly. Men who had become legends. The government wanted a place that would break that legend. They chose a 12-acre island sitting 1¼ miles off the coast of San Francisco, surrounded by currents so vicious that the army had once used the island specifically because they believed no prisoner could survive the swim. The water temperature hovers between 45 and 60 degrees year-round. Hypothermia can set in within minutes. The currents flowing out through the Golden Gate can pull a strong swimmer out to sea before they even realize they have lost control. This was the whole point. The water was the wall, the bay was the barrier, and for 29 years, Alcatraz held that reputation. During its operation, 36 men were involved in 14 separate escape attempts. 23 were caught alive, 6 were shot and killed during their attempts, 2 drowned, and 5, including our 3, were listed as missing and presumed dead, but presumed is doing a lot of heavy work in that sentence. Now, let me tell you about Frank Lee Morris, because understanding this man is understanding why this escape was different from every other attempt before it. Frank Morris was born on September 5, 1926, in Washington, D.C. He was abandoned by his parents as an infant. He grew up in foster homes. By the time he was 13, he was being arrested. By the time he was an adult, he had been convicted of narcotics possession, armed robbery, and bank robbery in multiple states. He escaped from facilities in Louisiana, Florida, and Georgia. But here is the detail that changes everything about how you think of this story. Frank Morris had an IQ tested at 133. That places him in the top 2% of the human population. This was not a common criminal grinding through the system. This was a deeply intelligent, deeply resourceful man who had spent his entire life studying how institutions worked and how to beat them. When he arrived at Alcatraz on January 20th, 1960, he had already decided he was not going to stay. The Anglin brothers arrived separately. John William Anglin came to Alcatraz in October of 1960. His brother Clarence arrived in January of 1961. They were from a large family of 14 children, raised in rural Georgia. Both brothers were strong swimmers. Both had been convicted of bank robbery. Both had attempted to escape from the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, which is exactly why they were sent to Alcatraz. The system was supposed to crush their will. Instead, it put them in the same building as Frank Morris. There was a fourth man. Alan Clayton West occupied a cell near Morris and the Anglins. West would play a critical role in the planning, but on the night of the escape, his involvement would take a very different turn. The plan began to take shape in late 1961. Morris had noticed something about the design of the cell house. Behind the cells in B Block, there was a utility corridor. It was unguarded. It ran the length of the cell block and connected to a ventilation shaft that led to the roof of the building. If a man could get through the back wall of his cell, he could access that corridor. If he could climb the ventilation shaft, he could reach the roof. If he could get off the roof, he could reach the shoreline, and if he could survive the water, he could reach the mainland. Every single step of that sequence was supposed to be impossible. Morris intended to make every single step possible. The first problem was the wall. The cells at Alcatraz were built with hardened concrete and steel, but the concrete around the ventilation grills at the back of each cell had deteriorated over the decades. Moisture from the bay had weakened it. Morris discovered that with enough patience and the right tool, the concrete around those vents could be chipped away. The men fashioned digging tools from stolen spoons, metal scraps from the prison workshop, and a makeshift electric drill built from the motor of a vacuum cleaner. Every night, after lights out, they would dig. The work was agonizingly slow. They could only work during the music hour, when the sound of accordions and other instruments being played by inmates would mask the noise of metal scraping concrete. Each man worked on his own cell wall, carving out an opening just large enough to crawl through. To hide their work, they created false walls from cardboard, painted to match the surrounding concrete. During the day, the vent grills appeared untouched. The guards walked past them on every count and saw nothing unusual. The second problem was the guards themselves. Alcatraz conducted regular counts throughout the night. A guard would walk past each cell, shine a light in, and verify the presence of each inmate. If a bed was empty, every alarm on the island would sound. Morris solved this with an idea so audacious it almost sounds fictional. The men created dummy heads. They used a mixture of soap, toilet paper, concrete dust, and paint stolen from the prison art supplies. They sculpted realistic human heads, complete with flesh-toned paint and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop floor. These heads were placed on their pillows, arranged under blankets, positioned to look exactly like a sleeping man in the dim light of a cell at night. When you see photographs of these decoys today, they look crude, they look almost comical. But, in the darkness, through the bars, with a flashlight sweeping past for just a second or two, they were convincing enough, and that was all they needed to be. The third problem was the water. The men could not simply swim 1.25 miles through freezing, current-torn water. They needed a vessel. Over the course of several months, Morris and the Anglins stole over 50 raincoats. Some were purchased from other inmates, some were taken from the prison supply. Using instructions from a popular mechanics magazine found in the prison library, they cut and glued the raincoats into a 6-by-14-foot inflatable raft and individual life preservers. They sealed the seams with heat from the steam pipes in the utility corridor. They fashioned a bellows-like device from a modified concertina to inflate the raft once they reached the water. Every component was built in the dark, behind the walls, in a workspace the guards never knew existed. The evening of June 11th, 1962, began like every other evening on Alcatraz. The inmates returned to their cells after dinner, the lights dimmed, the music hour began. And then, one by one, Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin squeezed through the holes in the back of their cells, climbed into the utility corridor, scaled the ventilation shaft using a network of pipes and a homemade wrench, broke through the ventilation shaft cover on the roof using a modified length of steel, crawled across the rooftop, descended down the bakery smokestack on the northeast side of the building, crossed the yard, scaled the perimeter fence, and reached the shoreline. Alan West did not make it. His false wall would not give way in time. He eventually broke through, climbed to the roof, but by the time he got there, the others were gone. He returned to his cell. In the morning, he cooperated with investigators and provided a detailed account of the entire plan, which is the primary reason we know as much as we do about what happened. The escape was not discovered until the morning count on June 12th. A guard noticed that the head on the pillow in one of the cells did not look right. He reached through the bars and touched it. It rolled off the pillow. The head was fake. The cell was empty. Every alarm on Alcatraz sounded. The largest manhunt in San Francisco history was launched within the hour. The FBI, the Coast Guard, the Bureau of Prisons, local and state police, all converged on the bay. Helicopters swept the water. Boats dragged the currents. Agents searched the Marin Headlands, Angel Island, and every stretch of shoreline within miles. They found pieces of the raft. They found a paddle. They found a waterproof bag containing photographs and personal items belonging to the Anglins. All of it was found in the water or on the shore of Angel Island, which sits between Alcatraz and the Marin County coast. But they did not find bodies. Not that day. Not that week. Not ever. The official FBI position, maintained until they closed the case in 1979, was that the men most likely drowned in the bay. They pointed to the water temperature. They pointed to the currents. They pointed to the fact that no verified sighting of any of the 3 men was ever confirmed in the United States after that night. The case was handed to the United States Marshals Service, which keeps it open to this day. But here is where the story refuses to end. In 2015, the History Channel aired a documentary in which the Anglin family presented evidence they had kept private for decades. A photograph, allegedly taken in Brazil in 1975, appeared to show John and Clarence Anglin alive and well, standing together in front of a farm. The family also produced a Christmas card they claimed was sent by the brothers to their mother in the years following the escape. Robert Anglin, a brother who was not involved in the escape, stated before his death in 2010 that he had been in contact with John and Clarence for years and that they had successfully reached the mainland and eventually fled the country. In 2018, CBS San Francisco reported that a letter had been received by the San Francisco Police Department, allegedly written by John Anglin. The letter stated in part, quote, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I am 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." End quote. The FBI analyzed the letter. The results were inconclusive. They could neither confirm nor deny that John Anglin wrote it. In 2014, a study conducted by researchers at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands used hydrodynamic modeling to simulate the currents of San Francisco Bay on the night of the escape. They concluded that if the men had launched from the northeast side of Alcatraz and paddled north toward Angel Island at a certain angle, accounting for the tidal current, they could have reached land. The window was narrow. The timing had to be precise, but it was physically possible. Frank Morris, with his extraordinary intellect, had studied the tides. He chose the date and time of the escape deliberately. The current conditions that night were among the most favorable of the entire year. So what do we actually know? We know that 3 men executed one of the most meticulously planned escapes in the history of the American penal system. We know they got off the island. We know they reached the water. We know they had a raft, life vests, and a plan for navigating the currents. We know their bodies were never found. We know the physical evidence recovered was consistent with a water landing near Angel Island, which is on the route to the mainland. We know that the Anglin family maintained for decades that the brothers survived. We know that a letter surfaced claiming to be from one of the escapees. We know that scientific analysis says the swim was possible. And we know one more thing. In 1963, less than a year after the escape, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was closed. Attorney General Robert Kennedy ordered the closure, citing the high cost of maintaining the facility, but many historians believe the escape played a role in that decision. The myth of Alcatraz, the idea that it was inescapable, had been shattered. The rock had been beaten, and once that illusion was gone, there was no longer a reason to keep the lights on. Frank Morris would be 98 years old today. John Anglin would be 94. Clarence would be 93. In all likelihood, if they survived, they are no longer alive. But the Marshal's Service has said publicly that they will continue to investigate until the escapees are confirmed dead or reach their 100th birthdays. That means the case remains open until at least 2026. 62 years, 14 separate escape attempts across the life of Alcatraz, 36 men who tried, and 3 who vanished so completely that the most powerful investigative agencies in the world could not determine what happened to them. The water was supposed to be the wall. The bay was supposed to be the barrier. But on one cold night in June, 3 men with stolen spoons, prison raincoats, and papier-mâché heads did what every expert in the federal government said could not be done. They got off the rock, and they were never seen again.